This podcast is recorded on the lands of the Baramatigal people of the Darug Nation. We pay our respect to elders past and present. Hi everyone, my name is Ray and welcome back to the Launchpad Radio, the podcast where we explore the journeys of entrepreneurs, creators and innovators who are making things happen. Today we have with us Dr. Jerry Zhou, founder of Amazing Gut and maker of Ins and Outs. He's also a senior lecturer and clinical fellow at the WSU School of Medicine. Hi, Jerry. Welcome to the Launchpad Radio. To start off, could you maybe introduce yourself? Tell us a bit about who you are and what you do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for inviting me, Ray. It's very exciting to be on this program. So I'm a researcher. So I have an academic background. I did a PhD and then moved into Western Sydney to begin my research. And the area we do research in is something called gastrointestinal motility, and it's everything to do with functional gut problems and also the healthy gut. So, as you can imagine, if you're looking at gut health, there's many factors. Things like the microbiome, things like diet, and things like function as well. And I think that's where my research sort of began. It's sort of looking at those different aspects from a clinical perspective and also from a research perspective. And like you said before, moving into that commercialization space where your audience is most interested in. So I think I bring a unique perspective where I kind of I got thrusted into commercialization. I didn't really set out to become an entrepreneur or to commercialize, but with the sort of the landscape of research, you really want to be making an impact with your research rather than it's sort of sitting in the shelf. And I think commercialization is a really good, viable way to make that impact and to scale that impact as well.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a great cause. I feel like every researcher, if they have the potential to, why not make the impact, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So you've got a decade in clinical translational research, and now you're leading your innovation through your own venture. So if you take a step back, how did your journey in your PhD begin? Like, what made you want to choose this particular study?
Yeah, that's a great question. It takes me back. I'm actually a lot older than I look. um, so, um, so I think I began my PhD in 2012. So it's about 20 years ago. And back then, we were looking at microarrays, and microarrays were quite the new technology. So my supervisor back then, Professor Richard Christopherson, he made this antibody microarray. It was lab on a chip. And what we were setting out to do was to kind of look to determine the prognostics for people with colorectal cancer. Now, colorectal cancer, like most cancers, can be subdivided into group A, B, C, and D. Now, essentially, the types of treatment is determined by what stage of the colorectal cancer you get. So if it's A, you get surgery. If it's sort of C or D, it's surgery, chemo, and radiotherapy. It's very intense. But where the kind of the ambiguity comes in is those stage B patients, because some of them get surgery only, some of them get the whole course of treatment. And obviously, you don't want to get sort of all that treatment if you don't really need it. And essentially what we were proposing with this lab on a chip is with the profile of the type of cancer cells you get, you should be able to predict the prognosis and how much follow-up treatment you needed. So I worked on that for about 4.5 years, and I got some really good and promising results. And my supervisor was very excited. But it wasn't until right at the end of my PhD, I went and talked to one of the colorectal surgeons who actually does the operations and remove tumors. And I was speaking to him and I was showing him the results. I was very excited about it. And he said, that's really good. And I said, well, would you guys use it? Like, if this comes into the market, would you guys use it? And he said, no, I wouldn't. And I said, why not? Why not? And he says, well, you have to think about it from a patient's perspective. Are they going to rely their life, essentially? They're placing their lives in the hands of a microarray. Are they going to trust that? Or are they going to say, if I have a 1% chance of a reoccurrence, I might as well do all the chemo and do the radiotherapy. It's not great, but it's better than the alternative. And he said most surgeons are not going to be the one who sort of miss a cancer because they didn't do the follow-up treatment. So I think it was at that point that I kind of realized, the importance of talking with the stakeholders of the users of this technology rather than just pushing forward with technology, because you can have something that works really well, it's got very promising results, but it doesn't change the behavior of your end user. Like in many cases, especially medicine, I think it's a very conservative field.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where my kind of research mind it got a little bit altered, and I started kind of thinking about the end user, and I started thinking about that process. It's not just enough to create great research, but you have to make sure that it's going to be used later on as well.
It's so interesting that it like came as a part of your PhD journey and not something separate,
Yeah.
and that you're also kind of working on a product as a part of your PhD. So it's a very natural progression into commercialization.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because yeah, I mean, at that point, that technology was sort of being commercialized, and it was being sort of touted as the next sort of diagnostic tool. Yeah, it was very exciting, but it sort of ended up not being as successful as it could be. In partly, I think it was due to them not having that relationship with the end user. And I think a lot of researchers are afraid to go out and ask their end user because they don't think they understand. Most researchers just says, well, they don't understand how it's innovative it is. But at the end of the day, you need those end users on board to actually adopt that technology.
That is so interesting. So you've gone through this whole process of like figuring out a product, designing a solution, and talking to your customers, and now you have come up with a solution to your current problem, which is ins and outs. So you actually have your product with us. So do you mind giving us like a tour and an introduction of what you've come up with now?
Yeah, cool, absolutely. Look, I'll take you on a whole journey. So we have a clinic over at Camden Hospital. It's called the GI Motility Clinic, and it's a fully functional public clinic. So people come in, they get diagnosed, they get treatment. And there's a group of patients that we see, they have something called defecation disorder. Now, these are functional problems that affect how they poo, essentially. You have some people with fecal incontinence where they can't control, and sometimes poo can leak out. And there's some people with chronic constipation where, it takes them a very, very long time to have a proper poo. So in both cases, not ideal. But we have a really good treatment for that as well. It's called anal rectal biofeedback. It's a form of sort of physiotherapy where patients could come, they can get retraining, and essentially it's rewiring that connection between the anal rectal muscles and the brain. So you're kind of showing them how the muscles are working or not working in some cases, and then we show them how it should work, and then through repetition and training, they kind of figure out how to do it. It's a little bit like going to the gym and exercising a muscle, but while you're exercising, you can actually see which muscles are being activated. So you're making sure you're doing the right ones. Now, as you can imagine, like most sort of physiotherapies, it's very labor intensive. Like they need to come in every week, they need to do the training, and the whole course of treatment is about 8 weeks. So if you're ever like me and try to go to a gym for 8 weeks, it's pretty tough. It's really tough. So we thought, if we can't get them to the treatment, why can't we bring the treatment to them? Why can't we do it at home? And essentially, that's the basis for this medical device. We have it here, and it's essentially a little probe that they can take home and that they can insert, and it's got sensors on it, and it links to a mobile app. And essentially, the app acts as their trainer. It takes them through the whole therapy. It tells them what exercises they should do, what are the targets, and they try and meet those targets. And this probe essentially is their sensor. It's their training equipment, because as they're doing the exercises, it provides that real-time feedback so they can see what's happening. And all at the same time, that app is sort of finishing off a therapy, sending that data package to a clinician that they nominate. It could be a therapist, it could be a nurse, it could be a doctor, just so we're keeping a track of these patients, making sure they're doing it, and also making sure that they're doing it right. It's like your own personal trainer from home. Yeah, so that's sort of a summary of the technology.
Wow, that looks really cool. Was that entire device made within Western Sydney University?
It wasn't. So there were sort of several different aspects involved. The concept and the design was made in Western Sydney. So we sort of, as clinicians and as researchers in a clinical space, we're very good at identifying the problem, but we can't make anything. We're not engineers, and we're not sort of software developers. So for us, my goal initially was to identify the problem and to kind of really identify what requirements we needed for the solution. I didn't know sort of, what sensors to put in there, but I knew you needed something to measure those muscle contractions.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know, what material you'd be using for
Mm-hmm.
this, but I knew how long the probe needed to be to capture that information and, with the anatomy of sort of the anal sphincter. So I put together a requirement list, and we actually worked with some researchers to within Western Sydney Uni, Professor Barman Javadi from computing science, worked with him on really developing the software, and also Professor Paul Breen as well, kind of having a look at how the hardware would work. And for some of the prototypes, we actually went out to various companies. There's a group called IDE Group. It's a design firm. They're very specialized in making medical devices. They made the initial prototype. And then there's another firm called Design Momentum. They made the next phase of the clinical trial prototypes that we used, and also the final sort of production ready prototype. And essentially that's the ones that we took into various clinical trials. So we had a first in human trial, we had a full scale clinical trial, and then we had a market trial that we're trying to run at the moment.
Wow, that's such an incredible story. So basically taking intellectual property from Western and then converting it into something actually valuable for users.
Yeah.
So I noticed that you recently won first place in the Western Sydney University Research Impact Competition.
Thank
Congratulations
you.
on that, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, and I believe In and Out has got some accolades for its design as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you mind elaborating on how these wins came about?
Yeah, so the research impact one, it's okay. But I've got it's my third time doing a research impact competition, so I'm not new to it. And at various stages, I remember doing one of the research impact talks. Very early on, like at that point, this whole thing was just a concept, and we were talking about the potential. We were making promises. And at that time, like I didn't win, I was a finalist, but I think this time round, there was a lot more power behind those numbers, because they were real numbers and they were real impact, because we've taken it through clinical trials and we've shown that it works, and it's no longer promises of potential, it's data and numbers, and here's how far we've gotten. So I think that's where, that's really helped with winning that award. And then the other one is the Good Design Award. So the Good Design Award is an internationally recognized award on sort of things that are not only functional but designed with the user in mind. And we entered that. It's a little bit unusual for medical devices to win design awards, because medical devices are usually not made for the patient; they're made for the clinician. If you go into a hospital and you look at most medical devices, they're very sterile, they're very functional. Like an endoscopy is not made for the patient to feel comfortable; it's made to do its very specific job and to do it safely and effectively. But I think what set us apart with this device is because it's a home device. So unlike a lot of medical devices, this patients purchase and they bring it home with them. Like, it needs to sit within their sort of their own safe space, their own comfort zone, and we needed patients to be able to interact with it and feel really comfortable and take that ownership. So I think that's why we spend quite a bit of time into making sure that the design of it was not only functional but felt friendly and inviting, and it was something they wanted to use, and it wasn't something that felt out of place in their bedrooms or in their living rooms. So hence, it's round shaped, feels like a pebble, so it kind of fits well within their hands. It's soft touch.
It definitely does, yeah.
Yeah,
It's easy to use and it seems pretty approachable as well.
yeah, it's water resistant. There's no plugs anywhere. Like, all the charging's done wirelessly, so you just put it on a charging pad and it'll do its things. Like, a lot of it's made with comfort and sort of intention in mind, just so patients are able to adopt it into their home. Because I know, a lot of these patients that we interact with, they can have a lot of chronic issues. So their bedrooms look like a hospital, because they've got so many different medical equipment and medications everywhere. They don't want another piece of white medical equipment there in their rooms.
In their space,
In their
yeah.
space, and I think that's one of the options. We also see that there's a few different color options. There's actually 3 different color options, and I think that was something we found out during the clinical trial. So during the clinical trial, initially we wanted them to be this dark purple color that you see here, But when we was ordering a batch of the sleeves, they made a mistake in the coloring, and they said, "Oh, we actually accidentally added in too much white, so they're this fluorescent pink color." And they said you could either, well, he could either make more and changed it, or we can sell you these pink ones, these fluoro pink ones for half the price. And as any sort of cash-strapped entrepreneur, I said, I'll take the half-price ones, please. So for the actual clinical trial, I got a whole bunch of these fluorescent pink devices, and we were using them. I didn't think that they would affect things because we're testing if they worked or not. But the feedback we got from a lot of patients were like, I've never seen a device, medical device in fluoro pink, and I love it. It's something that fits with their wardrobe, it fits with their personality, and they're really sort of engaged with color. So I think that's where we thought, let's make different colors, and when they're ordering it, they can choose their favorite color. It's such an intimate sort of a device that
It
they need to
is,
use.
yes.
So I think we need to build some connection against it. It's not a thermometer. It's not something that they use once and put away. It's something that they need to continuously use for the next 8 weeks or 3 months. Yeah. So I think that's why we sort of put the focus there.
Yeah, and I'm glad it paid off. Yeah. So jumping toward like your entrepreneurship journey. So this is a pretty messy journey, as we've known in Launchpad. Like there's no one answer for any one person. What was your entrepreneurship journey like? Like what were some of your main highs and lows?
A lot of lows. Well, no, actually, no, it's not quite right.
That's pretty fair.
Yeah, yeah, it is fair. It's probably one of the toughest things I've had to do, and it's taken me about 5 years. So 5 years ago in 2019, it was just an idea in my head. It's taken 5 years for it to get onto the table, into the market as a proper device that's sitting here. I've been quite fortunate. So in most sort of journeys, they would kind of try and push things themselves. In my case, I was working as a researcher, and it was just another research project I was working on. Essentially, it was different projects, and this was one of the projects that I sort of knew that was commercialization was an endpoint. And then because of that, I got quite a lot of support from the university as well. So they put in some funds, and we got some grants as well to keep things moving along. But like I said, it's even with that level of support, it's still one of the most challenging things. And I think the challenge comes in, trying to pick up a lot of different areas that I don't have a lot of knowledge in. As sort of researchers, we could become very, very specialized. Your sort of specialization becomes your sort of it's what you're valued. I could come in and say, well, I know a lot about GI motility and it's my area, but as an entrepreneur, you need to know a little bit of everything. And you need to learn it quick. Like I had to pick up, patent law and try to figure those things out and do freedom to operate searches. I had to know about finances and balance sheets and stuff like that, accounting, and doing my own tax return for the company, not only my own tax return. And I had to learn things quickly, like with packaging, something so simple. I had to learn a lot about different types of cardboards, make those decisions and figure out how many of these would fit in a regular shipping box and how many boxes would fit in a shipping container, just to optimize things. Same with materials and doing clinical trials. So I think at the end of the day, one of the hardest things about being an entrepreneur is you have to make decisions, and some decisions, if you make the wrong ones, can cost you a lot. That could be time, that could be money, that could be resources. And as an entrepreneur, you don't have a lot of those things. So you tend to be very, very cautious. But I think the worst thing you could do as an entrepreneur is to do nothing. Like if you can't make that decision, things are going to fail. Even if you make the wrong decision, you can still try and fix it. Obviously making the right one is good, but there's just so many
just never
decisions.
know.
You just never know.
Yeah.
And if you make one wrong one, the next time you have to make a decision, you get really paranoid. And I think that's been one of the toughest things.
It's more like you're just jumping into the waters. You don't have much like preparation in the entrepreneurship world.
Yeah. I mean, it's like trying to navigate a maze in the dark. But I do have a lot of good mentors. So I went through Launchpad, and I went through another program called MDCTP through Cicadas Innovation. So I had quite a lot of really good mentors. People like Don Wright, has Ben Wright, who works here at this uni now, and also another mentor called Peter Spencer. So they're mentors you can can sort of ask for advice and they can help you navigate. But at the end of the world, you still have to navigate. So it's no
Mm.
longer navigating a maze in the dark. It's sort of just navigating a maze, but it's still a maze. The maze is still there. You have to make
It's
the
still
final
very much
call
so,
and you have to
yes.
take that responsibility at the end of the day.
Mm. So as you said, like there were quite a few lows in your journey. So when things got tough, like what kept you going? Was it the curiosity, the science, the impact?
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think in part was curiosity. It was just saying, look, let's see how far I can go.
Mm.
At the start, I kind of knew I didn't have a business background. And I thought, look, let's try and see how far I can go until my existing skill set just wasn't adequate. It just wasn't enough to go further. Then I'll kind of know my limits. That's one of
Mhm.
the things I gotta know your own limits, right? And I was really trying to test what my limits were in terms of commercialization. Like at the
Mm.
beginning, I like to be honest, I never thought I could go this far. I thought maybe I'd just take it to clinical trial and that be my limit. Um, so in many cases, I'm just it's a curiosity of how far I can push my limit. That's sort of driving it. In part, it's my own ego. I go, let's see how far I can go. And in part, it's sort of weighing out the risks and saying, I have my own sort of threshold and tolerance for risks. And as long as if I'm pushing it and it's below my sort of risk tolerance, then I
Mhm.
say, why not? It's going to take a little bit of time. And if I
Mm.
make the wrong choice, it's still an acceptable risk. I'm so
Mm.
willing to take that chance. Why
Yeah,
not? Yeah.
definitely. Risk tolerance is a pretty big factor for entrepreneurs. Would you say you've like expanded your risk tolerance during this journey?
Um, yeah, no, that's a good question. So
Mm.
I think so at the moment, I'm involved in quite a few of these sort of accelerator programs
Mhm.
and helping out younger entrepreneurs and
Mm.
providing advice to them. And I think the risk profile is different depending on at what stage you are when you become an entrepreneur. So I think, there are advantages to someone like me who's sort of being in the working field for quite a while. I
Mhm.
have maybe a bit more access to resources than maybe a younger graduate. But also the disadvantage is I tend to have a bit more responsibilities. So
Mhm.
I have a mortgage, I have a family, I
Mhm.
have a child as well. And then,
Yes.
that risk tolerance when it comes to financial risk or risk tolerance when it comes to leaving my current work and just,
Mhm.
maybe working on a company and sort of, it's something I've built for the last 10 years in
Mm.
research, that risk tolerance is sort of a lot lower compared to like a recent graduate who maybe
Mhm.
don't have those kinds of responsibilities. So I think it depends. In one way, like in terms of allocating resources, that
Mhm.
tolerance is higher, because
Mm.
I've acquired more resources over the years.
Mm.
But in terms of maybe financial resources and job security, it's maybe a bit lower now that I have a family.
Right. So it kind of changes, and everyone has like a different level of risk tolerance.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to take a break for a little second and we're going to play a fun game called the hot seat, the gut edition. So I'm just going to give you a question and then you just quickly think of whatever comes to your mind.
Yeah, cool.
Okay. Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay. Would you rather give up coffee for a month or your favorite gut friendly food?
Yeah, my favorite gut friendly food. That's an easy one because I don't have a favorite gut friendly food. Yeah.
um, would you never have bloating again or never have to meal prep again?
um, I don't actually do either. I
Mm.
don't get bloating and I don't do meal prep. But if I had to choose, I'd say never, never bloating. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is a fun one. If you could invent one futuristic health gadget with no limits, what would it do?
Mm. Um, that's a tough one.
First thing that comes to mind.
Yeah, look, I think the obvious one it would you just has be sort of, something that's able to cure someone who's really tough to cure conditions, things
Mm.
like cancer, it's
Ah.
that's sort of where my research came out of colorectal cancer. I'm
Uh-huh.
kind of seeing the impact of those, the diseases on
Mm.
patients. It's horrendous. And I think
Uh-huh.
if you have a magic switch to be able to fix that,
Like a
it's,
miracle pill or something along those lines.
yeah, yeah,
Mm.
it'll be life changing. Yeah.
Yeah, let's work towards it.
Yeah.
Who would you call if your lab flooded at 2 a.m.?
Oh,
Campus security?
No, I think I just tell my wife, hey, look, I have to go for a few hours and then I'll come back and I've got to run in and start grabbing things off the shelves and start saving those samples and kind of,
Mm.
taking them into my car and sort of bringing them home and putting them in my own fridge, I think. Yeah.
Okay, last one. What's one thing you believe about health that most people don't?
That's a good question. Let me have a think about it. I haven't been asked that question
Mm.
before. Um, yeah, look, I think health. Look, I think most people think health is just medicine.
Mm.
People associate health with medicine. But I think as I went down this sort of entrepreneurial journey and even with research, you begin to figure out that healthcare is not just medicine. Medicine is there primarily to treat disease. And health is not just disease. There's prevention, there's maintenance, and sort of keeping healthy, and sort of even to improve baseline. So I think it's a combination of medicine, diet, well-being, and sort of body and soul. It's sort of more than just medicine.
It's a holistic approach.
Yeah. Because medicine is just one
One
component,
component.
and it's just when you get sick. Yeah, but most people don't always get sick, right? You spend more time being healthy than being sick.
Thank you for those answers. That was a fun round.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. It was great. Yeah.
So looking ahead, what's next for Amazing Gut and Ins and Out? Are there any new directions, collaborations? Or what are your big goals for?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's a good question. So at the moment, we're at the fundraising stage of Amazing God. We've just spun out as a company, and we're trying to, raise some funds for that launch. So we have a proper product, got everything going. We've got TGA approval as well. So it's a, it's sort of a proper medical device, and I think the next phase will be to raise enough funds to kind of get that into the market. The other exciting thing that we've been looking at is because sort of our research lab has a lot of research, and I think Amazing Gut fits within that pathway. So, in terms of research, we have the clinic, we have a research lab based in the School of Medicine, we have a clinical trial center based at MacArthur Clinical School, and we have a fecal transplant clinical trial center based at the private hospital at Campbelltown Private. So we got different components, and I think Amazing Gut fits nicely at the end of that pathway. It gives us a really good flow where we can take problems that we see in our clinics, take them into the lab and create research around it, run our clinical trials in our clinical trial center, and if it's successful, have that pathway into the market. And we have a lot of different research. Some involve fecal transplants. Having look at different versions of sort of encapsulated fecal transplant that people can take orally, and it can really benefit both their gut health and their mental health. We also looked at various sort of probiotics and prebiotics, fibers, and different medical devices to treat different issues like bloating and sort of abdominal pains and things like that. So a lot of
There's a lot in the kitchen.
there's a lot in kitchen, because once you open the floodgates and say, well,
Yeah.
here's this nice pathway or a pipeline, there's a lot of research that we've done over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you don't have to do it all alone as well. To all the researchers that might be watching, what's one piece of advice you'd give them if they're interested in commercializing their research or just maximizing their impact?
Yeah, that's good. So I think a lot of researchers. Number one, I recommend them to go and talk to the end user, like whatever they're trying to create, whatever technology or device or thing they're trying to create. Talk with the people who's going to be the ones that's going to benefit from it or going to be using it. And really be honest with yourself and really be honest with their opinion. Because in some cases, your priorities might not be the same as their priorities, and their priorities may not always be health. It might be financial, it might be policy, it might be behavioral. So make sure what you're creating is something they actually want. That's probably the most important thing. And then a second one would be, especially as an academic entrepreneur, look beyond your area. You need the extra help. Doesn't matter how smart you are in your area to commercialize successfully. You need help. You need mentors. Because I don't care how good you are with the science, you need someone who knows finance. You need someone who knows, the technology, and you need someone who knows how to create a business. So I think, I wouldn't be here where I am today without the mentors and the support I've been provided, because it's a team sport. Creating a business is a team sport. You can't do it by yourself.
Thank you so much, Jerry, for joining us on the Launchpad Radio and sharing your insightful reflections. Your work, I think, perfectly captures what happens when you combine science and innovation and turn it into something that can have real meaningful impact. For anyone listening and who wants to learn more, where can they follow your work or stay up to date on what's happening on Amazing Gut?
Yeah, so we have a website for Amazing Gut. It's called amazinggut.today. But if you want to follow our research, we also are on social media. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook under GI Motility Unit.
Awesome. Everyone, please go check out Amazing Gut and keep in track with what's happening with health and innovation. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to Launchpad Radio. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, keep curious and keep growing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Thank you.